At 77, John Glenn, war hero, astronaut, senior senator, is returning to space. In 2 weeks' time, he'll clip on his heart monitor, climb aboard the space shuttle and accelerate to 17,000 miles an hour. Aging bones have experienced nothing like it. Officially, the mission will study the aging process, but to cynical critics of NASA, it's a stunt designed to raise NASA's credit. Today, Glenn said the reason he was going was science.
If you eliminate the science benefit, then there's no reason. Except that I want to go again, but that's not the... But that's not a justification for sending someone. There are lots of people who would like to go.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway.
It was 36 years ago that John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth in his tiny Mercury capsule. Glenn's trip lasted 5 hours. Overnight, he became an all-American hero. He was feted in a ticker-tape parade and was honored by President Kennedy. Now, nearly 40 years on, while space hasn't changed very much, he certainly has. NASA claims what happened to Glenn in orbit will give insights into the aging process. Others are less sure.
I think it's difficult to see how experiments on one individual in an artificial situation like space will really help us to understand something as complicated as the aging process.
Whatever the reason for his journey, when he comes back, the concept of old age will never be quite the same again. James Wilkinson, BBC News.
And the main news again tonight, the Israeli and
After he lifts off in the shuttle Discovery. Glenn, now a senator, talks NASA into letting him go to help find out what weightlessness does to old bones. ITN's James Mates has tonight's special report from Mission Control in Houston, Texas.
Capsule, go. Motor systems, go. Engine start.
He is already one of the American greats, the first U.S. astronaut in orbit, the man who put his country back into the space race.
Godspeed, John Glenn.
On that day, back in 1962, all of America watched as he sat alone in a tiny capsule being hurtled around the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour.
Roger, 0G, and I feel fine. Capsule is turning around. Oh, that view is tremendous.
36 years later, he's training to do it all over again. It'll be pretty different this time, but for the oldest man ever to go into space, it will be another step into the unknown.
It's when you look at these rockets that first sent Americans into space, you realize just how far the space program has come and just how long ago it was that John Glenn first flew. He was strapped into that tiny capsule, perched effectively on top of a giant firework while somebody lit the fuse. He had no room to move in there, let alone to walk around. There were no computers on board, so he did most of the flying by himself. He'll find his trip on the shuttle Discovery, at the very least, a great deal more comfortable.
So you can drag and drop to the floppy.
Drag and drop.
Grab it.
And of course, there'll be computers on board this time, 25 altogether. Mastering them has been one of the toughest assignments for this 77-year-old. His age, though, is the reason he's going.
Bypass it by pressing next.
Pressure calibration.
NASA wants to know more about the effects of G-forces and weightlessness on an older body. His every organ is being tested and will be monitored throughout. At his final press conference this evening, he predicted his colleagues will be giving him little peace.
And one disadvantage to the space station is you can float, but you can't hide.
Senator Glenn, if you at the age of 77 can fly into orbit again, how long can it be, how long will it be before ordinary citizens are able to travel into space?
I think ordinary citizens will certainly be able to travel into space sometime in the future. I think space travel at the present time is very expensive, and I think that's the thing that holds it up. If somebody wanted to come forward with hundreds of millions of dollars and pay for their trip into space, I'm sure they'd enjoy it very much.
There remains, though, the question of safety. His views on that today are very much the same as they were when ITN first interviewed him, way back in the early 60s.
Where you have speeds and power available such as this, sometime there will be accidents.
You're dealing with high powers and speeds and things that people haven't dealt with before, and is there a danger? Well, of course there is, a small danger.
But this is a man who once re-entered the atmosphere in an untested vehicle to splash down somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. The dangers now are nothing to the dangers of those early, pioneering days of space flight. This man's courage then won him the respect of a nation. Add to that a quarter century in the US Senate, a run for the presidency, and now the distinction of becoming the world's oldest astronaut. John Glenn has confirmed his place in the pantheon of all-American heroes. James Mates, News at 10, at Mission Control in Houston.